Kristen Muller, Director of Peters Valley School of Craft in Layton, New Jersey. And we are so grateful for the opportunity to bring this programming to you tonight. Thank you to our funders and the Greater Pike County Community Foundation and the New Jersey State Council on the Arts and our private foundations that help fund Peters Valley's programs, and also all our individual donors. Tonight, we are super, super excited to welcome Ernest Aryee. And Ernest is a creative professional whose experience spans the fields of ceramics and business. He was born in Accra, Ghana. Ernest credits his education in Ghana and the vibrant creative and intellectual atmosphere that he grew up in within his family for influencing his decision to be an artist. He holds degrees in art from the College of Art in KNUST Ghana. He has a BA from the Royal Academy of Art and Design in s-Hertogenbosch, the Netherlands, and an MFA from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois. He has widely traveled as an artist and educator. He's been active internationally as a lecturer, workshop presenter, and as an artist in residencies in the Netherlands, Mexico, Canada, Brazil, and the United States and Ghana, where he organizes the Accra Sculpture Invitational residency program. Ernest's business experience includes several years in the role of international sales, customer service representative for Nidec-Shimpo America Corporation in the ceramics division. He maintains a studio in Chicagoland area and in Ghana. His passion for teaching has led to the creation of intercultural opportunities for artists to experience the arts of Ghana. I am so very happy to welcome Ernest tonight. And before I hand over the presentation to Ernest, I would just like to say that this is a webinar format. So if you scroll to the bottom of the page of the screen, you can see an area that says Q&A. That's where you can place your questions. So at the end of the presentation, when Ernest has finished talking about his work and his initiatives, you can ask questions and we'll address them in order as they come in and as time allows. And in the chat, Rachel from Peters Valley, our registrar, she's putting in information about his bio and also his website where you can learn more at ernestarystudios.com. Welcome, Ernest, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Hello, good evening to everybody, and special thanks to Peters Valley School of Craft for this opportunity, and also for everybody who is tuning in tonight for this program. So let me do this. Let me share my screen, and then we can start going. So give me just a second here. So tonight, I hope to accomplish quite a few things within a short time. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the kind of work that I do, why I do it. And I believe that for every artist, we all get confronted with the same issues. We start the work, we see this blank space, right? We have an attempt to confront the questions of why, what, where, when, how are we doing what we're doing? And not just with these questions, but then you have a countless host of rational and sometimes irrational issues, 100% of each of those attending us. Hopefully, one has acquired enough discipline through visual education that you can express yourself. And for me, at least, I believe that's the aim of all of this, is to discover who we are, where we come from. What does that mean? Because whatever we do, I believe, has to tie into humanity as a whole. You don't just want to stay somewhere and make something that's so esoteric that nobody can deal with it, right? And then there's also the attempt to pour meaningfully into what you're doing. So this is pretty much how I see my work. So you're going to say a couple of things, depending upon where you come from the world. You're going to ask yourself, what is reality all about? This is my young son and I sitting on a crocodile. So next slide. And it wasn't just us, but somebody else. So you can see this is actually real. You're going to go to different parts of the world and very strange things happen depending upon where you go. And I think it all kind of jolts your sense of reality and what you expect, right? So this is the way I like to start out. Let's get next one. So one of the things I recognize is we use the word African, and it's a very deceptive name or term. So I want us to take a look exactly at what that means. This map shows you Africa in size relative to the rest of the world. So you can see the United States over there, France, Spain, Eastern Europe, Germany, Switzerland, India, China more than one times, Japan, UK. All of these fit into Africa, right? Okay, next slide. And then you come to the continent itself. You're going to recognize Ghana. Ghana is nestled on the west coast of Africa. And next slide. So these are some facts about Africa. Second largest continent with 11.7 million square miles, 53 countries. Africa makes up about 16% of the world's population. Its population has grown quickly from 220 million in 1950s. It's expected to be 2.3 billion in 2050. African countries, particularly those below the Sahara, more than 40% of the population are below 15 years of age. You just think about that. Next one. Now, this tells you about languages as well. So you can tell 25% of the world's languages are spoken in Africa. And then you have a graph to show you the percentages. So in Asia, 2301, in Africa, 2138, in the Pacific, and then the Americas. Next slide. So by this time, if I say I identify myself as an African, it doesn't quite make sense to me because it's such a vast place. What exactly am I talking about? So now let's narrow it down and come to Ghana. These are the regions of Ghana. So I come from Greater Accra. Greater Accra is on the coast, and you can see it's relatively tiny compared to the rest of the country. Next slide. So these are some, we're trying to narrow it down. So these are some figures or information about Ghana. We've had interactions with Europe for quite a while. So Portuguese, 1471, then the Dutch, then the Swedish, Danish, Norway, Prussian, Germany, British. Okay, so these are the people that have been in Ghana. Now, I come from the coast, right? Accra is right by the coast. So that by definition means that all these people have had some influence on Accra, where I come from. So Accra is occupied by the Ghana people. Most people come to Accra because Accra is a metropolis. It's hard to distinguish and tell who the Ghanaians are, although they live there and they have a vibrant culture. Now, the Ghanaians settled in where they are somewhere around 1275 by some accounts. Some give it much later. This is where they tell their origins. Ghanaians identify themselves as a breakaway tribe of Jews. They actually trace their heritage through Abraham's wife, Keturah. So their migratory paths went through Egypt, Uganda, Congo River, Cameroon, Nigeria, Togo, and then to where we are right now. By structure, they are headed as a priesthood with a monarchy. And it's kind of interesting because if you tie it down to the way the Jewish religion runs, you can tell there are some places where we kind of intersect. So this is who make up the Ga. You have Gamashi, which is the central part of Accra, and each of these has sub-districts. So basically, Tublo, Homa, Sren, Abola, Alata, Simpe, Akumaja, all of these are subgroups of Gamashi, and each of these has a monarchy of their own. Osu, where I come from, has Anoho, Alata, Kinkawe, Ashinte, and then you go down the list. Now, one of the things that I recognize is that my family, based on my name, has been resident or ties deeply into Ghana society going back to years. So when I'm in Accra, I just feel a sense of belonging. I really don't really question where I come from. My family is deeply tied into this place. Now, if you look at Gamashi in the Bese area, my maternal grandfather, that's where he's from. Now, if you look in Osu, I come from two areas in Osu, which is Anoho and Kinkawe. Kinkawe happens to be the section where the kingmakers are. And you see from the next slide, if you don't mind. This gentleman, he has his picture still adorning the building where these kingmakers are. And I kind of found out that this is my father's mother's father, which I found out he was a king of Osu. And my father is so modest that he really didn't say much about this, but I discovered this as I was doing my artwork, and it was kind of very revealing to me. But we trace our heritage going all the way back. My name at the moment, if you go back to Togo, you can trace origins of where we live in Osu in Anoho to Aneho in Togo, where we have descendants who during the migratory routes, they stopped there and they didn't come back to Accra with us. Next one. So talking about Ghana culture, this is the way Ghana culture is. The gentleman at the back in the blue is a friend that I made. He's a king of a subdivision in Accra called Adabraka. So that will be your monarch. Right in front of him, you see a priest. The monarchy gets its authority or its office blessed by the priesthood. So Ghanaians are extremely, extremely religious. The priest is the one who is seen as a guardian. He blesses. He makes sure that the society is moving the way that we think God should help us to move. That's the way our structure is. The next slide. And this will be an example of how a king will sit in public. So you're going to see the way he's dressed, his sandals, the beads around his neck, and this is how typically a king or a monarch would dress. Next one. Then comes the use of white. And what I want you to be looking at is all the visual elements that you'll probably see later in my work. But this is how the priesthood and the feminine side, which are the priestesses, this is the way that they will dress. And they have hyssop around their necks, and also they have all these beads as well. But white is a color that is used in Accra, and it has great significance. Next. Now, I tried to show you before all the different nations that have come through Ghana. What I'm trying to establish to you is that Ghana is a place in which you have to recognize that there are several layers into what we do. So one has to really peel through all the layers and ask himself, okay, what's going on? What does that mean? What's the significance, right? So as I showed the traditional religion, I'm also showing you Christianity, because many people have the tendency to think that Christianity is foreign to us. But you got to recognize that we've been in close proximity to several people for several centuries. So its practice is also as accepted as traditional practices. So this is the Methodist cathedral in Accra. And I think it began to be put up somewhere probably the past century. And 1920 something it began, and it was finished in 1960s, I believe. Next slide. So I'm talking about buildings a lot because buildings will feature in my work. So Ghana is a parliamentary democracy. We got independence from the British in 1957. I was born in post-independent Ghana. That has a whole lot of meaning for me because some of the experiences that went on in the colonial era, people my age and forward really don't have much of an experience with that. And I believe that it affects the way that we see ourselves or we project ourselves in nationhood, as well as the way we see ourselves globally. Next slide. So we're going to delve into education. My education can be split between what I gather from my family in the formal and traditional way, and then also what I got through formal education in terms of schooling. Okay. The school I went to has been very pivotal in shaping the way I think and what my worldview is like. This is the crest of Achimota School. Achimota School was set up in 1927. It was set up between three people, the governor of the Gold Coast, and then there was a British minister, and then a Ghanaian academic who was, his name was Aryee. He had a PhD already by that time. And they set Achimota School up as an ideal. It was the first co-ed institution anywhere in West Africa. So we had boys and girls together. But Achimota's ideal was also to educate people so that we didn't see color didn't become an issue, right? So way back in 1927, we're trying to break all that came with color and racism and all of that. So Achimota was like an ideal place to bring up someone who will have a worldview that will be acceptable every place. Next one. So this is the administration block in Achimota School. I'll just take you through some slides so you can see what this is why I spent from the age of 6 arguably through, I'll say 18, and then on to college, which is 24. But from 6 to 24, my worldview was shaped by living in an environment such as this. So next one. This is a typical dorm or hall of residency. So this is where the students will live. Next one. That's the assembly hall. Next one. And the school had gates around it. Lots of symbolism over there. What I like about this is the metal work was elaborately done. And these are all things that affected the way that I saw the world and how I saw architecture and artwork as well. Next one. So I've shown you the culture of Osu. I've shown you the academic institutions. And by the way, what I experienced, so many other people in Ghana also experience the same thing, because once you start going to school and you get into the formal system, most schools are structured this way. So most people who entered the Western education system, this is the kind of environment in which you brought up. This is what I'll contrast as a traditional environment, right? You see a king who is flanked by different people. And this is not the Ghana culture, this is Akan culture. So you can tell a contrast between the way Akans present themselves and how Ghanaians present themselves. Next picture. And then I'm putting here some of my influences. Top left corner, you're going to be struck with how very red the earth is. It will just amaze you. And in the center, you see a building which is put up by traditional people. On the bottom right, you see a courtyard built in the traditional fashion. The top right corner, a decorated compound. And then the bottom left corner is one of the oldest mosques that are put up. So you have the Arabian or the Muslim influence being shown to you as well. Next slide. Now I'm going to show you some of the social stimuli that you get. This is how Ghana operates. People everywhere, movements everywhere, colors everywhere. It's just kind of a dizzying array of activity. This is a transportation hub. Next one. And then this in the fishing community, you're going to see the same kind of feel that permeates wherever you go. Numbers, colors, arrangements. This kind of is how things are. Next one. And these are the people. The way fabric occupies a very important part in our culture, and also the way things are sold. Things are arranged, they are presented to you, and it's just the way people offer and present things is so welcoming. Next one. And this is a typical market scene. Take a look at the way the things are stacked up. It's arranged so meticulously. Next one. This I want you to take a look at closely. This is in the northern part of Ghana, and you're going to see a group of people walking, but the lady on the right side, she's carrying something on her head which is green, then the white scarf, and then she has a baby behind her. And these are the elements that I look at when I do my artwork. And so hopefully as you go through that, you begin to see some of these things show through that. Next one. And then how we experience clay in Ghana. You see the parts on the top right, and then somebody making parts of the lower right left corner. And then in the top left corner, you're going to see the northern part of Ghana, the way they decorate buildings. So this is a compound, and then in front of the compound, I believe they have a shrine to an ancestor or someone similar. And then the bottom right part of it, you're going to see the use of kente cloth and all the gold jewelry that comes with it. There's a lot of wealth, which you see replicated in the way adornings are made. And then to the right part of it, you see the way Ghanaians would express themselves. Ghanaians are a little much more muted in what we do. We're a little much more, we don't tend to be too loud, but you have to be really nuanced. You have to look at what you're doing to see what the interpretations are. Next slide. Now, we get to local pottery. Every house in Ghana has one of these. You use it for water, you use it for herbs. And interestingly, most houses will have two kitchens. You have the traditional Western style kitchen, which is inside. And then somewhere in the back in the shed, you have a local kitchen, right? Because these parts are put on the fire, so you kind of get smoky. So we have those two things. Again, these dualities that operate next to each other. The next one. These are items for the museum in Ghana. Just to show you a link to the traditions, I'm trying to establish what goes on in traditions so that once I get to what you do out of school, you begin to see and maybe ask yourself some questions. Next one. Next slide. Next one. So we've reviewed kind of a crash course in history. So now you ask yourself a question. This is me at 14 years old with my crew. So as an artist, you're asking yourself, what exactly goes through somebody's head at this point in their life that influences their worldview and what they make if they have to do anything artistic? Great thing about my family, my dad was an accountant, very good at what he did. When the country got independence, they were the ones that sort of set up the civil structure. So in the civil service, worked all over the country, and people kind of knew him for the work that he did. My mom stayed home. She was educated as well, but there were 8 of us. I'm the last of 8. So she took care of us, and everything we learned at home, our homework and our worldview, she was the one that also championed it very strongly. So we had a very strong pillar from either side, grounding us in what we thought. So this was me at 14. Let's get to the next slide. And this is me just finishing college. What I want to explore is between that age and here and then after, how does my experience influence the work that I'm doing? So now let's dive into it. Next one. So my artistic statement, you can tell the things I'm interested in. Formality, visual explorations, I'm looking at forms a lot. Variation, quality, I'm establishing rhythm. I use lines a lot, which is dominant in my work. It's a recurring theme. I'm using openings, depressions, projections, linear patterns, feminine and masculine assignments, right? All of these go into the contemporary culture of Ghanaian society. The issues that I'm tackling are migration, pride, identity, sophistication, ambition, religion, politics. These are the issues that I find interesting enough to explore in my work. Next one. So this is what I did when I finished grad school. Sorry, when I finished my bachelor's. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So you might be asking yourself right now, what of the tradition at all do you see in this work? Probably nothing, right? And for many years, I used to ask myself this question, but it's interesting now how valuable that time was. Our education was extremely rigorous. We did basic design. Basic design took you through the course in which when you're done with, you began to look at formal issues, you began to look at principles of art, you began to look at how the various elements are organized together. So you had an education which, although not based in your tradition, set you up for what you wanted to do. The way Ghanaian education ran is because we came from so many different areas. The school was not trying so much as to educate you in your culture because your family really did that job for you, right? So when you got into campus instilled into you all the kind of stuff that you'll be competing with internationally, and your home base is what grounded you, and those two things were put together. So I found myself in the Netherlands in this quiet place, and this is where I really dug in and began to do my work. Next slide. So I took 2 things with me, throwing as a skill, and then just use of line just as a basis for what I was doing. So the next couple of slides, you're going to see how I push that. Now, I have a tendency to take an element and push it completely until there's nothing else to mine from it. So the next slide, you see where this work took me. Next one. Next slide. Next slide. And to understand what's going on, my aim was just to take a look at the material to see what exactly can I do with clay that represents the concept of a line, right? And I'm trying to use that to develop my form. So I'm blocking out everything else and just concentrating on something narrow so I can get to a destination. Next one. Next. 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 Now, this would be the transition point probably into the work that I'm doing now, because at this point, I believe I was doing work without really looking at any content, right? The principles were all I was doing with. But at this particular point, I believe I'd taken a trip to England, I'd taken a trip to Belgium, I've been to an exhibition that showed traditional African work. So then the questions began to flood in my mind, the relevance of what I'm doing, how does it relate, how does the color go, what does it mean? And then quite gradually began to seep into my work. Next one. And coincidentally, at this point, I believe they were ordering some clay. The company could only deliver 2 tons. The whole class could only order a ton. So I said, well, just give me the rest of the ton. So once I got the rest of the ton, I just set to work, and my work just took up scale from then on. Next one. So this is the last piece I did before I left the Netherlands, and then we're going to transition into the States. So let's move to the next one. So I'll take you through my tiles. I kind of think through issues in making tiles before I go to sculpture. So we'll go through the tiles very quickly, but I want you to take a look at the colors involved, the use of space, the use of vegetation, the use of line, and all the things you spoke about before. You're going to see this crystallized in the tiles. So let's go. Next. 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 Now we get to the more three-dimensional freestanding forms. At this point, I believe my lessons in art history from Ghana began to take root in me. And so I'll now identify the use of architecture as the base of what I wanted to do. Now, why architecture? When you look in Accra, because it's very difficult to identify things that are traditionally Ghana, because as I said, the capital, right? You really have to dig deep to see where you can find these things. It's in going to your family house, it's in sitting down and talking to your family that you begin to assemble together what all your heritage is, right? So the building or the home, most of them are courtyards. You have to go in through one place. So I began to put all my symbolism attached to the building, and interestingly enough, things began to blossom from then on. So let's go from here. Next. 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 And I want to point out that most of these pieces I made from the wheel, right? So these two you see over here, I'm still tying myself to the wheel. I just can't get away from it. That seems to kind of center me. And I just find the whole activity of throwing very soothing and very satisfying as well. Next one. Next. 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 So as you look at these, I want you to reference the early pictures I showed you. I'm kind of dealing with a human figure, but I'm using buildings or architecture as a vehicle to do. There's a lot of symbolism that's in there, right? So it will come up probably at the end. We have questions, I can go through them. Next. Next. Now, for an extended period of time, I found myself in this role of a salesperson, but I was selling ceramics, but I decided to do it as an artist. And the interesting thing I found was that it was very easy for me to put up workshops to structure education. And that was the back way to get my sales done, right? So once I could go to a school, I could assemble people, we will talk about the work they did, we'll talk about the clay, and then in the end, we'll talk about the equipment that we have. How does that address what you do? And it was very satisfying to help in engineering the equipment because I knew exactly what the artist wanted to use. So this will be some of the workshops and how I kind of conducted my activity for probably about 10 years. Next. 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 Yeah, so you can just keep clicking through these. Okay, we can stop right here. So that kind of takes you through the travel. Now, in a period of about 10 years, I was doing this job as a sales rep, but I was also teaching at an art center in Chicago. So I had this extremely grueling schedule. Probably 4 days out of the week, I'll be traveling. And then when I came home, I taught on Thursdays and then Sundays. And I did that for quite a period of time. Now, in 2007, I've always had this idea of doing an educational program in West Africa. So I kind of transitioned, and I started taking people to Ghana to do residencies. The difference in what I did was I wanted it to be something where they could be closely tied to where the art was done, but importantly, to use the traditional people as teachers. So in these next slides, you're going to see how we got that done. And thanks a lot to Nsika, to the Teachers Fund, and also to the many people who did participate. So this program is ongoing, and I kind of want to put the next one sometime in February. So you can click through these as well. Yeah, you can click through. Okay, stop right here. The other part that I love extremely is food, cooking. And you can't come to Accra without delving into the cooking scene. And my mom has always been a good cook. So each one of the 8 of us always learned how to cook, and we learned how to do it flawlessly the way she wanted to. So when I've traveled, I always like to add a cooking demonstration to the work that I do. Ceramics is usually functional, and I've found that when I do have these cooking demonstrations in conjunction with teaching clay, it just bridges the gap so much, and you form so many social relationships that are very meaningful to the work that we do. So the next slide you can click through would be what I've done as well. Okay, now we'll stop here. One of the things that has been in my mind is you brought up in Ghana, because most people who leave the university, you're going to end up somewhere within the social system. You're going to be teaching, you're going to be working in the government section somewhere. And so they're probably educating people to take over industries and of the sort. So I've always felt this affinity to kind of give back. And in going back and forth to Ghana, I went to this school, and all the wheels were lined up. You can see on the left here, they all rusted. Nothing was going on. Fortunately, because of where I was working, it was easy for me to arrange for them to get new equipment. And shipping anything from here down there takes more than you can imagine. But we went through all the hassle, ship things there, clear them from customs, and then set them up. So the school, as far as I know, should be operational at the moment. Next slide. Now, to the Invitational, what I've done over the past 2 years is I decided to transition the residency into what I call an Accra Sculpture Invitational. So the idea being that I would invite a guest artist, we'll put together a team, we'll take a look at the work, and then we'll execute it. And the idea was that when it's finished, it will become a public work of art. So this takes you through how the current work that is in Accra was done. And what I'm trying to do is to use artisans, people who have basically not been through the formal school system, but to use their workshops as a way, because I found that when you work with them, one is able by association to transfer a lot of skill, a lot of management skills, very soft skills that help them to be able to improve the work that they do, and also to recognize them. The other part of it as well is that I make sure that they get paid for what they're doing. So most of them, if the project lasts for 6 to 8 months, it means that I'm making sure that they draw a paycheck, which goes a long way to help them as well. All of this I've done through generous contributions from both myself and my family, and through others who have pitched in. So this is the way it's always worked. So you can go through those slides. And then the piece got commissioned, and then you can see what it looks like. Next one. Next slide. So we'll wrap up with the more recent work that I do. What I found out was the work I've been doing before the past, probably up to the past 10 years ago, I felt that I was at a place where I was not moving as far as I could. But once I started going to Ghana, I started studying from the traditional artisans and craft people. I began to learn what they were doing. I kind of stopped doing my work and began to learn from them, what they're doing, what it looks like, what the reasons are behind them. My work began to take a different turn. And so you see from the next slides, the work that I'm doing and what it looks like currently. So you can go through. So this kind of encapsulates what I've been working on. Again, my job as an artist, I believe, is not so much the belief system or the religion, or I believe those things exist on their own. But I believe for any artist, you want to assemble some form of vocabulary. And then you want to assemble the tools by which you can express that vocabulary. So I look at these issues that I happen to be a part of because I understand the ins and outs of them. But ultimately, I'm looking at something in which I can pull different elements from. I can get a meaningful enough execution that when I'm done with my work, it begins to speak to everybody on a much more objective level. And that's one of the hardest jobs for an artist. And I'm just hoping that what I'm looking at, what I'm doing, is making enough impact. On the social part of it, for me as an artist, I feel because of what I've gained from education and from all the benefits that I have, it has to translate into social action. That's why I involve myself in all the projects that I do in Ghana. And my hope is that our work, clay being functional, I can translate something as well into what people's lives are like, either public sculpture or just a conversation that helps people also to improve the lives that they do. So this is the work that I do as an artist. Let's see what the next slide is. So that's information for me, and I'll yield to you. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Ernest. Please feel free to put questions in the Q&A section. I have a question for you.
Yes.
As I told you before, my friend Barbara, who spent time in Ghana, she sent me some information saying that oftentimes, is it traditional that the women make the pottery forms, the traditional crafts forms, the functional forms in Ghana?
Yes, it is. And it also depends upon what kind of work it is. So you see that in all the workshops that we have, you see mostly women making the pots. They are not full-time potters. Most of them are farmers, and then in their off season, they'll make pots as well. But yes, pottery is mainly a female profession. It's interesting though that when you switch over to the wheel, you find more men working on the wheel than making handmade pots. So that's how it's kind of broken out. Yes.
Oh, that's very interesting. And also, I remember her explaining that the clay pits are very sacred, like very special places where you harvest the clay.
It depends on the society. We have so many societies through the country that each particular locality, right, they might term a particular area sacred because it may be on the banks of a river, right? And a lot of people kind of venerate certain river bodies. So if you have clay in these areas, definitely it's going to be something that they take as sacred. So you find that typically in a lot of rural areas, yes.
Also, I find it so interesting that you've moved into the sort of large scale work, how do you fire the public works, those pieces that are installations?
The public work that we did, when I set out, we're going to do it in clay. And I set out in 2020, in February. My understanding was I was going to go to Ghana. I'll spend 4 weeks and we'll get it done, right? I got there and COVID hit. So that changed everything. So that meant that I had to come back here, and we did it mostly by Zoom. We did it between February and October. I was here, I was in touch with them, and everything was being done that way. I had an able team and everything got done. But we decided then to change the material and use concrete. Interesting enough, my work right now involves building buildings, and concrete is what we use. So I'm very versatile with that. So we thought that after several considerations, that would be a much more suitable material because of the limitations. So we use concrete in doing that. But I want to go back for the next one and actually do clay. There's a huge kiln that we have there. It's a wood kiln. And my intention is to gather people together and make a work that we're going to fire and put out.
Fantastic. So interesting. So Leslie Lutke is asking, besides working with clay, did you also make the black and white woven pieces? The pieces that were fiber?
No, the black and woven pieces are my sister gave that to me. And fabric is an extremely important part of life in Ghana. It's woven locally, but also there's a whole commercial business that's Ghanaians established with the Dutch, right? Going back, so you have Java prints from Indonesia. So using fabric in my work evokes certain particular themes that I want to bring into that. But in Accra, I'll give an example. Every time my mother would, there were 8 of us, every time my mother gave birth, my father would give her mother a piece of fabric. So each of the children, so my grandmother had 8 different pieces of fabric, which were all given the symbolism. The colors are symbolic. So that's the way it is. So what I'm doing right now is I'm gradually drawing those things into my work. And this particular fabric was given to me by my elder sister. She's one of the ones that has been extremely pivotal in my education and financing and everything else. So I'm drawing things from my personal life and bringing them into my work. And probably in a different format, I'll be able to get more into that.
Fabulous. Maurice Bird states, excellent presentation. I love the historical perspective tied into the art. I'm ready to go and experience it firsthand. Sign me up for one of your teaching tours. Great job.
Thank you.
Well, that's a good point. If somebody is interested, should they contact you on your website?
Yes, so my website has a portion there where you can send me a message. So what I'll do is I usually like to consolidate trips, right? So I'll usually put people together, and I like to make sure that we have similar interests. So I will take the names and I'll make a suggestion as to what I think the itinerary is going to be. And then we all come to a consensus, and then we have the trip. So it's kind of open, although I said I'm trying to go in June and then again in February, but it's, you know, it's kind of flexible. So if I have enough of a group, I think we'll be able to make it happen. So, and also what I like to do is I like to establish a relationship with some teaching institution, and Peters Valley seems to be a pretty good one. But I like to have some relationships where we can take trips there together and kind of work on programs there. But I think that the atmosphere is extremely fertile, and you can tell we have millions of young people who are just dying for something to do.
Yeah, so I loved all the demographic information of population and age groups. That's so interesting between the different countries. And Diane posted a question. When you begin a sculpture on a wheel, do you first test it for structural integrity for when and if you make a larger model? So do you make maquettes? How do you think about
I used to in the past, but I think that after you do this for a while, you kind of know, because people think I'm quiet, but my mind never stops working. So usually I'm sitting and I'm thinking about, you know, in 10 or 15 different ways. So before I start the work, I've pretty much thought it out. And also I said, I've been in the building industry now for 8 years. So what we do is we put up high rises in Chicago, 75 stories, 100 and something stories. And so I've gotten into this point of, and my job is to kind of check the structure from beginning to end. So I've gotten into this habit of sitting down, looking at something, and then kind of figuring what's going to go. And I'm kind of bringing a lot from the industrial world into the work that I do. So it kind of meshes very, very easily.
That's great. So Diane said, thank you. And Leslie Litke is asking, is schooling free or do parents have to pay for their children to go to school in Ghana?
It's yes and no. Right now they have what they call a free education. Actually, this will amaze you. When I was growing up, it costs to go to primary school and secondary school. So it was kind of prohibitive. But guess what? Once you got to college, it was free. So you go to college, your room, your board, your books, your food, you don't pay a penny. It's changed now, right? So when I was growing up, the schools you went to, they were kind of costly. So if your parents are in a position to send you to certain schools, that kind of set you up. Most Ghanaians spend a sizable proportion of their income towards their kids' schooling. That's something that they don't joke with. Parents will pay 150% of their salary to make sure that their kids go to a good school. And so education always drives everything that we do in Ghana. And it's just the way that it is. So my schools tended to be on the more expensive side of it when I was growing up, but things have changed these days. So it's not quite the same structure.
So as someone who comes from a family of 8 as well, you are very lucky they didn't run out of funds to send you to school.
You grow up and you think your parents are hard until you grow up and you tell yourself, well, because the school I went to, 3 of us went there. So it means that over a 16-year period in that specific school, at least 3 of us were going there. Now, don't even mention the rest of the other 5. So it makes you grow to have an extreme amount of admiration for your parents because they were not the richest people on earth, but it's interesting to see what they do and how they make it happen. So.
Yes, absolutely. So Susan Francisco says that was so worth waiting for patiently. So thank you.
I'm very sorry about the issue with the slides and all that. It's like we got everything prepared and they just last minutes, so but things happen. So
things happen. And I wanted just to share with you that my friend Barbara brought me a traditional pot from Ghana, and she brought me the shell that the artist made it with. So that's holds a special place in my house.
These pots are so special because from the earliest I can remember, we've always had a pot like this at home. And actually, I started being aware of pots from probably when I was 3 or 4 years old. It's kind of very unusual, right? Because when you cook in those pots, right, you boil water in it to wash. The water has this nice smoky smell to it. Then you put water in it, and the water gets as cool as water coming from a refrigerator. Okay, and then you boil herbs out of that. So most Ghanaian families, there's this relationship with pots that it's an unsaid relationship, but they are the very basis of our society. You offer drinks to people in that, and it just forms a part of our fabric. And you never quite notice it until you have to start doing art. And then when you have to think for where your influences are coming, guess what? It's right there. You just never saw it.
Right. Thank you. Diane asks, who is your best critic?
My best critic? My family, we kind of very grueling. I'll tell you, my dad was known, my dad was educated in the classics. In his age, he studied English, he studied Latin. In those days when they spoke English, I think they spoke it as language that belonged to us. So when we're growing up, that's just the way that it was. We've used these languages in Ghana for many centuries, right? So sometimes people, when you think of English, you don't quite think of a society as having that language. But several things we've practiced, it's been more than 200-300 years, right? So we take it very dearly. So my dad was an extremely fierce critic of language and etiquette and just basically how you carry yourself. And I think that each one of us inherited one from him. 3 of us became accountants just the way that he was. So imagine. Yeah.
Nice. So Diane is asking, what kind of glazing is the interior or used inside? And I'm just going to say, Diane, There is no glaze at all inside this pot. Not at all. And I use pots from South America, from Chile, where my family's from, and we cook in them, and they have no glaze, and they're earthenware, and you can make the best roast in the world in them. So they're
You
very
can.
special.
And
Yes.
something I discovered as well, they go through a process very similar to raku. I was blown out when I saw that. They put this slip, sometimes a red slip, sometimes it's plant matter, but they put this around the pot. And when the pots come out of the fire, they separate them. Those that are red stay on one side, but the ones that they carbonize, they have a lot of leaves, green leaves, and then they wrap it in green leaves the same way you would use in raku firing. And after a while, they take it out, and they're the most beautiful carbonized pieces that you see. And sometimes they have a flash that goes around it, right? The other areas where they use the palm fruit as a way of firing these parts as well, and the reaction from the oil in there as well happens to flash on the part. So I have a whole slide that takes you through what they do, but that's what they usually do with these. But yes, you're going to cook on these things, so you don't want them to be tight, which is the other symbolism in some of the work. What earthenware means, what low fire means, the whole concept of permeability, right? Spiritual sense, they're not wrapped tight. You can take in influence, you can take in change, right? So these are all the things that we haven't spoken about, but it's kind of woven into the work that I do. So yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. Thank you, Ernest, for a fabulous, informational, and inspiring presentation. And oh, someone now is speaking up. Leonard Dankwa is saying, I see that he uses textiles in conjunction with clay for creativity. Will he consider using metal weddings and creating his outdoor works? I'm thinking weldings, maybe metal in your outdoor work. Will you consider that?
Yes. The next piece that we do, as I said, the last one, because I kind of got hurried out of the country, we're not able to kind of land the way I wanted to do. But the next ones that I do, as you can see, I'm using a lot of local talents, right? So the ones that do my workshops for me, they work in the lost cast wax process like the Benin people do. So my aim is to use a lot of these artisans together, right? So we come in and then we sit down and then we plan it. So I have the concept, but I'm trying to execute it through the local talent. I think that way it gives credibility to the local talent, because sometimes they don't quite see their work as worthwhile. And my job is to let them see the validity of what they do and its importance, especially in entering into the formal education sector. That's what my interest is. So that when you study art in Ghana, it's not just academic, you can also practice it from these traditional people. So yes, that's where we intend to go.
It's a really interesting perspective that elevates the traditional craftsperson as skillful and useful for modern ideas and execution.
Yes, they are. And what I've done is when I use them, because I've taught here, I usually take a look at how much I get paid for a lecture. So when they work for me, I pay them something similar. And it does a couple of things. It lends validity to their work, but also it gives them a financial buffer that they can use. It may take them 1 or 2 years to work to get that money, right? But I make sure that they have something so that they begin to see value in what they do. Because my belief is that the kind of education I'm setting up is to use them as tutors, as instructors. And that helps to kind of prolong and extend our values using art. And many people don't, when they think of improving our economies, they think in all these industries. Nobody stops for a minute to think that art gives value, right? And probably because I'm a salesman, if you put me down within 10 minutes, I can tell you exactly how to get $1 million. It's not hard to find. But through these people, you know, I think our economies will take a different turn if we look at economic development in a much more different way.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your inspiring lecture. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. If you want to learn more and keep in touch with Ernest, please check out his website at ernestarystudios.com. And if you'd like to share this lecture, Rachel will get it onto YouTube by next week, if not sooner. And thank you all for your patience tonight. And thank you, Ernest, for your inspiring presentation.
Thank you
And
so
I
much.
hope our paths cross again. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.